In this morning's U.S. Bank Economic 360, we're talking stuff, the kind all of us buy. Some important economic numbers were released last week in the form of retail sales for April, and it wasn't very good, at least not as good as expected. U.S. Bank Vice President and Senior Portfolio Manager Mike Denneman is in the studio with producer Kelly Leon to talk about what it means. Mike and Kelly.
Thanks, Peg. Well, obviously, we're not doing a good enough job with our spending.
Well, what have you been doing this weekend?
I know. Got to get out. Got to get buy-in. So, why is this number important? What does it tell us?
Well, it's one of the more closely watched of the indicators because our economy is so focused on the consumer. And because of this, you know, if we know what the consumer is spending, where he's spending it, that gives us a pretty good idea of how the economy as a whole is doing. And so it's more elaborate than it sounds. You know, when you say retail sales, it kind of sounds like, you know, how many shirts did Macy's sell last month? And it is that, of course, but then it's so much broader reaching. I mean, clothing, food, cars, gas, going out and eating, furniture, washing machines, anything that the consumer would spend money on is included in this number. And not just brick and mortar stores either, but also online purchases. So it's really all encompassing. And because of that, it gives us a pretty good snapshot at any one particular time of how the economy is doing.
So what went wrong with this quarter? What went wrong with the number?
Yeah, the expectation was much better than the reality, and that was disappointing. Looking at April, we were expecting a nice increase over March, you know, things would have picked up nicely. Unfortunately, the number was basically flat, so showing no improvement over the previous month. And the reason that's somewhat of a concern is, you know, we've talked in recent shows that there are some nice tailwinds out there right now for the consumer, some things stacked in the consumer's favor. The price of gas, for instance, remains very reasonable. That puts more money in the consumer's pocket. Theoretically, that should flow through into retail sales. And then the weather. We talked about how the consumer just doesn't spend a great deal when the weather is lousy. And now that spring's here, we should have seen a nice rebound. But unfortunately, neither of those things really seem to have contributed. So we got the disappointing number. And, you know, that could be cause for some additional concern.
So when economists look at these numbers, what does that tell them about the future as we move forward?
I would say that right now it's too soon to make any definitive conclusions, but depending on whether you're glass half full or half empty, you know, if you're taking an optimistic view, you would think, well, maybe we just haven't had that spring bounce yet. I mean, we're talking April, and there was still snow on the ground just a few weeks before, so people maybe weren't in the mood to go out and do their spring shopping. And if that's the case, we should see a real nice rebound in May. If you're glass half empty, though, perhaps this is an indication that maybe the consumer just doesn't feel very good about their personal financial situation and they're really cutting down on their spending. If that's the case, and this is a trend, because the economy is so concentrated on the consumer, that could be a real concern. So a lot of eyes will be focused on the May number. It'll be more important, really, I think, than the April number was because of what we just had happen. So we'll wait for that, and we'll cross our fingers.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it maybe in a couple of months.
Hopefully I'll bring some good news.
Yeah, that would be good. You're always good news, Mike. We love having you here.
Thank you, Kelly.
We appreciate you and U.S. Bank.